Let's return back to the venue, the unfortunate venue where 21 supposed 21-story building collapsed in Ikoyi, Lagos State. At the moment, rescue efforts are still on the way. Officially, 3 people have been rescued from this horrendous scene. And we also have the Deputy Governor of Lagos State, Mr. Hamzat, there at the venue to send his to commiserate with those victims and also with those people that have suffered heavily. Let's get to listen to it.
So the people are actually are building are also inside. So how do we get that information? So the question, let me basically.
Can you come closer with the microphone? Please bring it closer, please. No, it's not the microphone, it's this.
Okay. So basically, we are going by the information is fluid. Remember, it's not a residential building yet. So it's not that we have tenants and we have list of people. So we're getting different information. Fortunately for us, we have 1 or 2 people that were able to come out and said, well, they think, they are not sure. They think one of them says 24 people they're there, another says about 28. So we don't know. Okay, so we are just going by what we have, but we have some names. So you can see that in there they were shouting some names and the lady was responding. They were calling her name. I'm not going to give the name. So they were calling the names because they know she was there. So we are not sure exactly. Like I said, it's a construction site. People come in. We understand also that some people came in just to inspect. Maybe they wanted to buy or something like that. So we don't know the number because people are just coming in. So we are not sure the number, but as we are able to see, we are getting people out, and hopefully we'll be able to get everybody out alive. No, so you are responsible to your employers. We are responsible to the people of the state. Our focus is on saving lives. So that's what our focus is. So it's like I said, it's a search and rescue operation right now. So let's just focus on that. We are mobilizing all the needs that we want, every equipment, everything that we need to save people's lives. So that's the focus now. If you get the information, that's why I'm here. And then, so it's straightforward.
It's obvious that we would have a lot of turmoil around the other 2 buildings. Just to know what the Lagos State government will be doing as far as those 2 buildings are concerned. And from the layman's ideology, Ikoyi, for instance, is in a swampy area. So for you to have this happen, it could have been anything, but of course within the confines of maybe construction negligence, as it were. Will Lagos State, what kind of measures will Lagos State be taking in terms of punitive measures for those perhaps who have done this construction, and maybe conduct perhaps an enumeration of these high-rise buildings that are springing up by the minutes around Ikoyi and in Lekki Phase 1, as it were? Thank you.
Okay, basically, so there is something that is called structural integrity test. So as a matter of fact, if you are aware, this location was sealed for about 4 months, sometimes ago. It was sealed from July. I think it was open from June. So it was sealed because our agency came in to do structural tests. They saw some anomalies, so they shut it down and said those things should be corrected. And so we normally do this. So the second building will also be audited in terms of integrity test. And of course, if we find anything, then the appropriate action will be taken. So, and it's important to also announce that we have an agency that's supposed to do this job. And that's why they came in around July to check. And when they saw the anomalies, they shut the site down. So we do that regularly, and we just hope that people will understand the need for state government to also do that most of the time, to make sure that if there's an anomaly, we will shut it down, just like we did. And they were making corrective actions when this happened. So, another question? Which memo? No, so there are processes for sealing. You don't need to send memo. Yes. So you come here, you visit the site, so there will be a project manager, and then you give them the sealed document. And then, of course, in front you see the normal mark and then the seal. So it was shut down from, I think, June to November. So that when they made some corrections, we checked the results, and then they came back. So now, remember, a lot of, at the time that this is happening, they were not really constructing. They were also trying to show people what investigation later will also show exactly what happened. So it's difficult to answer the full details of what the state is until we do a sort of serious structural integrity test.
Stephanie Basari, CNN. Stephanie Basari, CNN, sir. We understand that the building was approved for just 15 floors and additional 6 or 7 floors were added. Can you explain, or do you have any more explanation about what happened in that process and how they were able to make those additional floors?
Yeah.
It seems as though CNN and I were...
The approval for this particular, as you can see, there are 3 buildings. So some 1, 2, 3. So this particular one was approved for 21 floors. It's not 15. This particular one was approved for 21 floors. So I guess you are talking, if you count, that's about 14. I think that's another 14 or 15. So was done about 3 years ago. So it's not something new, but it's the construction. It's the construction that, that failed apparently from what we can see. So the approval was actually for 21 floors. This particular one collapsed. Well, I mean, there will be an investigation, and then the information that will guide the direction of what we do. Nígbà tó bá sọ pé ó fẹ́ kọ́lé, so ó máa kọ̀wé sí ìjọba. So company tí yóò kọ̀wé sí ìjọba náà la máa fi fún wọn ní àfihàn, la máa fi gbà pé kán máa kọ́ lọ. So orúkọ company here is First Call. So ó dẹ̀ wà lára ẹ̀ ń bẹ̀. So kì í ṣe, so òun náà kọ síbẹ̀. So that àwọn tó gba approval ni the company ilé-iṣẹ́ ni ló máa gba approval pé a fẹ́ kọ́ nǹkan báyìí wọ́n á dẹ̀ wo gbogbo nǹkan. So ilé-iṣẹ́ ló gbà, àwọn náà dẹ̀ la fún ní approval yẹn.
And we're bringing in our special Arise News correspondent, Femi Akinsoya, who is on the scene at Gerrard Road in Ikoyi to give us the update of the situation. Femi, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I know you can't see me. I hope you can hear me too. But indeed, you've got the Deputy Lagos State Governor on ground. He's been on ground for more than an hour. It was actually his arrival and his presence on the ground coincided with the retrieval of those 2 people who were pulled from the rubble, conscious and alive. That's most definitely been the highlight of what we've been seeing on the ground here today. But interestingly enough, there were conflicting reports about the status of this building, whether or not it had approval to be 21 floors. We did hear reports that it was only supposed to be 9 floors or 15 floors, but the Deputy Lagos State Governor has just said that the building did have approval to be 21 stories high. In that context, it was not in breach of any type of code, but still that doesn't answer the issues about what caused the building to come down in the first place. I did pose a question to the Deputy Lagos State Governor. I asked him what the status of this probe that was announced by the Lagos State Governor yesterday, what the status of that probe was. And he says, well, the investigation, that probe is still ongoing. What they are doing now is being able to, first and foremost, take care of the human aspects of this story, making sure that they're able to retrieve as many bodies as possible and making sure that they are able to continue to look for survivors. You'd have to remind yourself that here we are at noon, West Africa time, and it's noon, just after noon, and that is nearly 24 hours, from 22 hours since the building first came down. And the fact that all of those hours later, despite night falling, despite the rain that came down in the aftermath of the building coming down, there were still people who were alive. We also heard reports that people who were trapped in the building and still conscious were calling, using their mobile phones to call people to let them know that we are still here, we still need to be attended to. They should not give up hope on finding us. And that was why you had the emergency officials telling us this morning that they had isolated certain parts of the rubble because they've been able to make communications with people still trapped inside. The Deputy Lagos State Governor, as I said, was just addressing the press, and he talked about the need to, first of all, make sure that as many people as possible are recovered from the rubble, and then the business of the formal investigation continues. But I think the biggest takeaway that we've been able to hear from the Lagos State government is that the building did, in fact, have the approval to be 21 stories high. So that dispels the myths that it was only supposed to be 9 floors or 15 floors. It was, in fact, supposed to be 21 floors. So says the Deputy Lagos State Governor. And as we hear that, we will still remain on ground for any more updates as it pertains to survivors. And also, if we can hear early inclinations on what the cause of this building coming down was. I did also ask the Deputy State Governor if we would be looking ahead at criminal charges. Would the investigation take a criminal, or would it maintain a civilian disposition? We're still not sure of that. It's still too early on in the day. As I said, it's not yet been 24 hours. But one thing we do know is that the families of the people who are still missing are still on the ground. We had a woman who was inconsolable who said her daughter was still in the rubble. Somebody has not been able to tell her what the status of her child was, and that is significant because, as far as we're aware, no woman has been pulled from the rubble just yet. Each and every one of the survivors, as far as we are aware, have been men. So to hear a woman is searching for her daughter creates the obvious idea that far more people than originally planned may well have been stuck in that building. Another takeaway from the Deputy Lagos State Governor is that the building had a history of some sorts of conflicts with the government. It had been sealed for months last year up until November, and that continued to be the case in the early parts of this year. And while he did confirm that it was allowed to be 21 stories high, that doesn't address the concerns in terms of safety, in terms of procuring the correct approvals to build, to have a building like this. You'll also be aware that despite the rubble of the downed building, there's still 2 others that are part of this project. They are still standing, but obviously we're unable to find out whether or not the construction of those 2 buildings will continue or whether they'll be pulled down under a controlled demolition. One thing that we cannot deny is that one, if not both of those buildings, has been compromised by the impacts of the downed building that we're seeing in the distance there. So, you know, when we look at Ikoyi and we look at Lagos, we know that there are high rises in the sky. It's definitely something that's not a stranger to this part of the city. But if we're talking about property development and the investments therein, there's a huge amount of money being poured into these buildings. And you can imagine that when people make these investments, they're investing in something that they believe is good, something that they believe will be of a certain quality that will return their investments financially. And so to see that an incomplete building could be brought down like this with so much casualty and distortion being put onto the people here as the searches continue for their loved ones, it does put it all into perspective. This has definitely been a tragedy, and though there have been very small silver linings in the sense that survivors have been pulled from the rubble, those 2 people pulled from the rubble, conscious, one of them being able to wave. I mean, that is definitely something to be celebrated, but it is minuscule, that celebration, in condition to the level.
If you can actually hear me.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yes, you just mentioned a silver lining right now. And please talk to us between yesterday and today, in the space of the last 21 hours since this incident occurred. You've mentioned 2 people today. What does that bring us to in terms of survivors from this unfortunate incident?
That raises, there's been a bit of confusion. So in the immediate aftermath, we thought that those 2 people would take the survivors to 5, but there have been reports that brings our survivors now to 7. And unfortunately, the death toll of people remains at least 6. And, you know, when we were here on the ground yesterday, we were told by people who were close to the scene that more than 50 people were actually on ground. So that means that there are dozens who still haven't been discovered. So, there's still a huge aspect that is left unanswered. How many people are there? Remember too, that we have not heard any word on the owner of this building. It is believed that he is among the people who was trapped in the rubble, and it's unclear whether or not he has been recovered alive or otherwise.
Femi, this is truly a tragedy. I mean, we're just looking at the footage from now. It seems like there are a lot of people on ground. Can you talk to us about the density of the crowd? Is this just around the front of the building? I mean, are they allowing the first responders be able to do their work? And also, what is the mood on the ground? The families, can you talk to us about some of the families and the people that they are looking for inside of the buildings?
So in terms of the first responders, they have been able to have free reign of entering and exiting. For the most part of yesterday, we were, inside the gate and at the scene of the downed building. And in the aftermath of nightfall, we were asked to join the rest of the journalists outside, which is where we are now. So the emergency responders, all of the different emergency officials, they've been able to stay on ground and been able to bring their ambulances in, put casualties inside, put people inside, drive them in and out. All of that process has been fine, has been able to continue. In terms of the mood on ground, there's a huge presence here. You'd expect that there will, of course, be journalists and bystanders, but there are also the families of people who are still missing, people who are unclear on what the status of their loved one is. And of course, that heightens the tensions on the ground. You've had very animated scenes of people crying, people praying for positive news from this disaster. And so with that happening here, that's definitely made the mood on ground here a lot more tense, a lot more tragic. That being said, there is still a small air of hope that many more people will be rescued from the rubble. It is a disaster. You're seeing the excavation machines still at work. The fact that you were able to pull somebody, more than one person, out of that rubble alive, even close to 24 hours later, is a miracle, and we can only hope for more. Hawa.
All right, I definitely quite unfortunate the scenes we're witnessing. I must commend you for the work you're doing. But talk to me, the Lagos State Building Control Agency. If, as you've spoken, that they were given permission to go ahead, how much blame should actually stop at their table at this point in time? Because certainly they should be able to know the progress being made by these developers at the time or prior to this building going down. Talk to us, what are they saying in respect to this particular incident and how much of the buck stops on the table?
Well, through the Deputy Governor, it's been clear that the Lagos State Government did have a problem with this building. It was sealed for upwards of 6 months in the months leading up to November 2020. And even though this year, work hadn't fully commenced, people on the ground here, the Deputy Governor told us, weren't actually doing too much construction, though it is a construction site at this point. Most of the people on ground were there to perhaps take a look at the grounds. Perhaps investors, visitors to the grounds were there before, in the immediate moments before the building came down. So in that token, it does sound as though, despite the history of some sort of infraction between the builders of this property development and the Lagos State Government, there seems to have been some form of understanding, especially since the building was no longer sealed at the point that this building did come down. In the middle of off-the-record conversations, we did hear that the Lagos State Government has been struggling to some extent to keep up with the rate of property development and developers building on land or building without the correct authorization. And definitely, if you don't have the authorization, you won't be able to get the certification. And, from the comments that we heard, if you seal one place in Ikoyi, in Lekki, The next day, another one could be going up. So it does sound as though there's a bit of difficulty in the state government being able to keep a tab on all of these new batch, a new crop of property being developed in and around the state, most especially on the Lagos Island. And when we look at what has happened here, like I said, it was quite confusing yesterday. There was so many different reports in terms of what was allowed to happen and what actually did happen. So to hear from the Lagos State government itself that the building was allowed to have 21 floors, it leads us to now ask, okay, so what was the problem then? What caused it to come down? That investigation is still ongoing, but still within those conversations that we've been having both yesterday and today, it does seem as though the quality of materials of the building are up for question. Perhaps the metal that we're seeing wasn't the correct size, the materials being used to build and construct the different floors, what role that plays in this building coming down. There are a lot of questions as it stands, Aaron and Hawa, as to how we even got there. If we've been able to solve this issue that, okay, fine, you were allowed to have 21 floors, it doesn't answer the question of why those 21 floors came down like they did.
Adefemi Akinsoya, for your brave and thorough reporting, thank you so much for this. But we will be actually recapping from what has happened since yesterday. Adefemi Akinsoya also gives us that report, so please stay tuned and watch for this.